Making this video, I thought that maybe this was the forgotten child of the amazing Super Multicoated Super Takumar lenses. Maybe this was simply a lens that was neglected and I would be the one to bring it back into the light. I mean, you can find this lens for a steal online, and I found mine for $20 at an antique store. For this video, I decided to use this lens in 3 different scenarios that I could see myself using it day to day. 1, in sports photography, utilizing its 200mm to get more reach in a fast-paced environment. 2, during a wedding ceremony, taking advantage of that super multi-coated glass and get a vintage and dreamy look. And 3, I took it on a walk to the park to see if this is a lens that you can cheaply get into nature photography. So let's start with the crazy idea about using this lens for sports photography. If you haven't seen already, I included this lens in a video I made about shooting sports photography with vintage gear overall. My experience with this lens was not at all as I intended. I was in love with the idea of having a lens with a 200mm focal length. However, I neglected the issue of a f4 minimum aperture and the fact that I would be using manual focus in a very high speed environment. That being said, if you shoot sports photography in a non-professional environment and you're not under the pressure of getting every important moment, then you can get some awesome close-ups. You are never going to get the action shots of a player coming at you. Manual focus is just way too hard for that, but for slower shots like right before a play, or maybe someone's taking the ball down the court, then it's definitely more than possible. Just keep in mind of the f4 aperture if you're shooting indoors. If you have a camera that performs better than usual in low light, then this could not be a problem at all. The second situation I put this lens through is a wedding ceremony. This is a much better environment to use this lens in. While weddings can definitely be described as a fast-paced gig, compared to shooting a sports event, you have much more time to pull focus for special moments. And this lens is sharp when you have the time to focus. You can be assured to keep the lens wide open because wide open is f4. And if you're in a bright environment, stopping down the lens to a 5.6 or even beyond will assure you that you're getting an even sharper photo. Most cheaper modern lenses that go up to 200mm have to stop down close to f6.3. And I guarantee they're nowhere close to $20. All of a sudden, that lens seems a lot less light deprived of other options. The final thought of using this lens is being able to dip my toe in nature photography. I took this simple walk at a nearby park, and I've been exploring the idea of selling stock photography and thought this lens would get close enough to the park animals, such as squirrels. I don't think that 200mm is exactly enough to get super personal shots of any animal, but for these squirrels that were very used to people around them, I was able to get a little closer than I think a typical wildlife photographer would. I did notice heavy fringing in the lenses. This shot with a squirrel on a walking path, you can see a lot of green hues in the asphalt. The asphalt bounced a lot of light and there were no clouds in sight, so that allowed a bit of fringing. But that's nothing that can't be fixed in post. I think that the best thing this lens does is render skin tones. If you shoot a model session or perhaps a family session, you just get a warm vintage vibe. Don't get me wrong, a lot of these photos are edited, but I'll throw in a few raw photos in there, only messing with the exposure and contrast, and I think my point still stands. That, coupled with the compression of using 200mm, makes great separation with the subject and the background. I just think this is a very powerful portrait session lens. Well, that's gonna do it. I've been wanting to get a Super Takumar lens for a long time. I found this as my first one, and honestly I'm kind of happy I did. It's different and it's much more cheaper than the more popular focal lengths. I just want to take a second and say thank you to everyone who watched my last video. It got a lot more attention than I thought it did, and it brought in a lot more subscribers than I thought it would. I appreciate every last one of you, and I look forward to making more content in the future. So go ahead and hit subscribe, and I'll see you next week.